Hey guys, how are you today? We are sharing a soul calling today, and I have Becky Farrar with me, and she's representing the fear theory. And I'm gonna allow her to introduce herself and tell us about her mission. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing well, really excited to have you and learn about you and what you're doing.
Thank you for having me. My journey with the fear theory actually started in January 2026. That was when the fear theory framework was officially born. Um, But actually, the story goes a little bit further back from that. I actually think if we go back really far, it goes back to when I was 18. So I wanted to be a professional dancer and I achieved my dream of going off to dance college, and it was something that I'd always wanted to do. I was ever so excited about being there, but yet very quickly on being there, I felt quite out of my depth. I felt like I didn't belong. I looked around at all these people that were really amazing, and for the first time ever, I was completely and utterly consumed with self-doubt and comparison in a way that I'd never experienced it before. And I didn't know how to navigate that because no one had ever really taught me about mindset. So, in all of my childhood lessons, there'd been a lot of the physicality and the potential. And I'm a believer that everybody has potential. I'm a believer that everyone is capable to do the things that they want to do within their heart. But I think sometimes that the journey to getting to where we're able to get to can be a difficult one to navigate. And it's about having those skills to be resilient and learning how to use our mindset in order to benefit us. And basically, 18 years old, I didn't have that mindset. I literally remember thinking, I am just not good enough to be here. And I left. And looking back now, I was absolutely good enough to be there. I did have the potential. I did have the capability. I wouldn't have been able to dream about being a professional dancer if it wasn't a bit able for me to do. But that was a situation where I was put into to support my growth and what I call an identity expansion. So I said to someone recently, like, if we want to be able to be stronger at something, we have to go through situations that are going to support our strength. If we want to be braver at something, we've got to go through situations that are going to support our courage. But I just, as I say, I'd never experienced something like that, and I left. So what I did was I set up my own dance academy, and I always set it up very different because I didn't just want it to be about professional dancers. I wanted to be able to support children with the internal skills that they could use for life. So lots of the ones that we focused on were self-belief, togetherness, resilience, individuality, visualizing success and enthusiasm. And I always believed that with those core values, these children, whether they decided to dance or not, and 99% of them didn't, would be able to go out into the world equipped with a real growth mindset of what it would take for them to be able to fulfill their goals, move towards their potential, and basically live a life that ultimately we all want to live. And I loved my academy. I was so passionate about it. I was incredibly dedicated. And then a bit of a turning point for me came in 2020. So I opened my own facility in 2020. That had been a 4 year process to get to. And within 6 weeks, COVID closed. And it was at that point where I felt a strange thing, really, because I didn't actually miss the dance. So that was a big, like, oh, hell moment because I'd spent so long pouring my heart into something and gaining this facility for then for it to be taken away and me not to miss it. But what it did actually make me realise is that it was never really about the dance. My love has been about how we can support, or how I can support, or just in general, I just love, almost obsessed with like human potential and personal development. So I was like, oh, this is not being the dance. Like, I've just loved the personal development. But COVID was also the first time in my own life that I felt like I took a breath. So, from setting up business at 19, I'd always been so incredibly driven and really conscientious. And I believe our strongest gifts can also be our nemesises. So, whilst it was amazing that I was really conscientious and I had really high standards, that also took a lot of maintaining, which I didn't realize until I was given the opportunity to stop and pause and breathe and reset. And that's now one of the things that I'm a real advocate for is making sure that we're taking time to connect with ourselves, taking time to have it, I call them intentional pauses, having that downtime and not thinking, because I thought this for a long time, that my worth was in what I achieved and how much I did and the outcomes of things, whereas actually our worth is in who we are as people. But after COVID, everything went back. And then in 2022, I was actually on a mastermind course, a business development course, and we had to do a meditation. And it was all about future self and future you and the things that you were doing. And my meditation looked nothing like the life that I was currently living. So I had one of those other moments again where I was like, okay. And but for me, I couldn't ignore that. I felt like I'd been given this little bit of a glimmer as like, this is what you're here to do more of than sort of what you're currently doing. So it's like, this is where you've learned the basics of it or the foundations of it in the dance studio, but actually the world needs a little bit more of what you've got to give. And I felt really drawn to pursue that. And I think there'll be people listening now that know what that inner feeling feels like when you have a draw towards something and a pull towards something. And it's like your heart or your soul is guiding you in a particular direction. But at the same time, I had massive fear, huge amount of fear. Like, and I literally, I say now recently, like, excuse the pun, but it's so true. I literally danced with fear for like 3.5 years because I felt so excited about what could be. But then every time I stepped forward or started to make change, I just got scared. So then I'd go back to what I knew. And I'm obviously still very early on in my journey of the identity part and the self-leadership part and the personal development part. And I'll always share my truth from where I'm at. But for so many of us, we want the change and we feel the desire towards the change, but our brain is programmed for familiar and safety. So it will do its utmost, and 9 times out of 10, it's pretty successful to just pull us back to always what we know, what we know, what we know. But then it just became where the pull just felt so much, and I actually then really started to lose my love for something that I'd always loved. And that becomes a point where I go, there's something here. Like I've got to trust, I've got to have a go, I've got to see. And after quite a turbulent sort of few months at the beginning of 2025, like I like to ask the universe to bring me signs. And I think sometimes that comes from perhaps maybe it's a reassurance thing. Because I think that when we're asking for support or something or reassurance, or we almost know what we want to do, but we're scared. So we want that reassurance. I was like, right, I would love for a yellow pig. Like I always pick something really random because then it can't just be like passed off as coincidence. So I was like, right, please send me this sign of this yellow pig that like I'm able to stop teaching. It's safe for me to stop teaching, explore something beyond what I already know. 7 months later, that had still not showed up. And I was actually at this point doing a nervous system reset course because I'd started to just feel really anxious in my body. Ultimately, now for me, it's because I was out of alignment. Like, I think when we feel certain things within our body, it's our body and our nervous system acknowledging that, like, just something's not quite right. And there was the one question, and it just completely and utterly struck me. And the question was, you are one decision away from a completely different life. And I was walking my dog in the country park and I just started sobbing. I just sobbed because I knew so much in my heart what I needed to do and what change I needed to make. And it was like that realization of just the realization of not, of really truly not being able to almost run from that anymore. Um, and I just made that decision. I was like, okay, this is time. I've just got to do it. I put everything in place that I needed to, and in November, I did finish teaching, and I finished teaching in my heart with wanting to do global speaking, and I always share that because who knows where that might be. Like at the moment, this is very much. I'm always really honest, as I've said about this is chapter one energy. Every day, every week, I'm walking the unknown. I'm seeing what comes and I'm learning a lot along the way. But shortly after finishing teaching, I was offered opportunity to speak at an event called Inspire. So straight away I was like, oh, well, I love the name for a start. Yes, obviously it was then a speaking opportunity. And I wanted to think really carefully about what I could share at that event because I think it's amazing to inspire people. But I think information without implementation doesn't equal transformation. So I wanted to be able to share something that people could take away. And I was like, what journey have I experienced over the past few years? What's been like a prominent theme in my life over the past few years? And I was like, fear. Like fear, that's the thing. Like I've literally just been scared. I've been scared of change. I've been scared of moving on. I've been scared of the unknown. All of these like different things. So I started doing a little bit of journaling. I'm a big journaler. I spend a lot of time going inwards and sharing my thoughts. So I started like creating a little bit of a framework of the fear theory. And then a few days later, I was actually looking through an old journal and found from 2023 and found a framework for the fear theory from 2023. Now I don't do coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I was like, oh my gosh, like, and genuinely I'd forgotten doing that. Um, but my fear theory came through my own experience of just feeling so ridiculously scared and frightened, but in the same aspect, feeling so ridiculously drawn and curious to a possibility and a potential and a what if. So, my fear theory is about supporting people to create a different relationship with fear because we all feel it, we all experience it. Nobody is immune from it. And it's something that comes up every time we grow. So, the F in the framework is future focus. So, this is who am I becoming? Who do I want to be? And when I say what do I want to achieve, I don't always necessarily mean that as an external, but even if it is an external, we then have to think about, but who do we have to become to then be able to achieve the thing? So the future focus is like, who am I becoming? Who am I growing into? Who am I evolving into? How am I growing? How am I evolving? How am I developing? E is expansion capacity. And this is where a lot of the work is done. This is where all of the snot and the tears come, all of the meltdowns. Like, I have my own really regularly. And I actually said to someone recently, like, I've definitely been in a phase of growth the past couple of weeks because I call them mind gremlins. Like, my mind gremlins have been so loud and so noisy. And I've been incredibly emotional. And my self-doubt has been really loud and my questioning has been really loud. And it's these moments where we acknowledge this. So now, does it feel comfortable? Absolutely not. Like every time I go back here, I think, oh my gosh, like I'm here again. It never gets any easier. But now I'm able to kind of go, okay, I'm growing. I'm growing here. I'm feeling this for a particular reason. Why am I feeling this? Because perhaps I'm being stretched, because perhaps I'm being asked to, I said that earlier on, like gain strength in an area that I'm not sure that I know. So the expansion capacity is about learning to recognize, understand, and navigate our internal experiences and our emotions because things that we've experienced in the past they affect us in the present. A lot of the time, our nervous system, it's constantly scanning like what feels safe, what doesn't feel safe, what feels threatening, what doesn't feel threatening, and our limiting beliefs. So there's so much stuff within this. But ultimately, if I could encompass the expansion capacity, it's about being self-aware. So just being open to being self-aware, understanding and learning what's going on. And the biggest teaching that I teach within this is the voice of protection. So the voice people talk about like imposter syndrome or inner critic or the ego. And whilst them terms are absolutely fine, ultimately we get all of these thoughts, like the doubts and everything, because we're trying to be protected. We're trying to be protected from the unknown or from repeating a situation that we've maybe done in the past that didn't maybe quite turn out so right. So our brain is like, oh my gosh, we are not going back there again because last time we did that, this happened. Or, hang on a minute. No, no, no. We don't have evidence that this is going to be able to work out. And if we don't have evidence that this is going to work out, we're not going to do it. So I'm going to try and talk you out of doing the thing that you really feel like you want to do because I want to protect you. So it's being aware of when that voice of protection is there. And then actually maybe thinking about, but what would my voice of expansion say? And this is when we come back to then the future focus. So they all link with each other. So the voice of protection is always going to protect the current identity that we're in. The voice of expansion is supporting us to align with that future version. Who is she? Who is he? Who are they? What does that look like? And keeping coming back to that. And it is hard to shed parts of ourselves. It is hard to lose parts of us that have kept us functioning in the way that we have done for such a long time. And then following on from this, we have aligned action. So this is where there's two parts to this. There's either a movement part, which is where our courage and our self-trust come together and we take that one small step forward to align ourselves with the future version of ourselves. So we're coming back to that future version again. What would the future version of me do in this situation? And another thing, I'm actually just going to go back because I've just thought of something, and I always think if I've thought of something, it's relevant to say. Decision making can often be something that can sort of paralyze people because they get scared of like making a wrong decision. And one of the other things that I'm an advocate for is go into your heart and just think if everything was to turn out exactly how I would want it, what would decision would I make? Because then it helps alleviate all those what ifs and also just trust in yourself that there is no wrong decision. Like there's just a decision. And if it's a decision that perhaps takes you in a different direction to maybe what quite you expected, I say, well, the expectation was created by the narrative in your head anyway. So just go down that road, gain whatever experiences on the way, and be okay with that. So I think aligning going into your heart with if I knew that everything was going to work out, and if I knew that on the other side of this, I could become her, I could become him, I'm all aligned with that, then that would be the aligned action to take, even when fear is there. Because I think for so many of us, we have this expectation that when we're going towards something that's right for us, that actually should all feel completely amazing. And sometimes there will be that aspect of hesitation. There will be that aspect of doubt because if it's the unknown, if it's the unfamiliar, if it's something new, we don't have evidence that it's going to come out. So we have to have the faith and the belief before we have the evidence. So people talk about being confident, like, oh, I'll move when I'm confident. We have to actually be courageous. Like, courage is the thing that comes first. We have to be courageous. Then, afterwards, then as the evidence starts to come in, then we become more confident in it. But another part of aligned action, which goes right back to my COVID story, is sometimes I think that the right action can be an intentional pause. Like, not all movement needs to be forwards. Sometimes it's good to just stay where we are Because as we're growing, as we're evolving, as our identity is expanding, our nervous system is constantly recalibrating. And sometimes we just need that moment. And I always say to people, if you've got an iPhone, when it's on an iOS update, because it's updating and it's upgrading to the next iOS, we can't use it. We just have to put it down and it goes offline. And I think as people, we have to be compassionate enough with ourselves to give ourselves the same grace with that, to give ourselves the intentional pause, because again, that's how we connect within ourselves and check that we're going in the right direction and allow those emotions, like allow those feelings to come through, because sometimes as well, it can be a clearing. It can be a shedding, it can be releasing and a letting go, so that we're not taking those thoughts and feelings forward to that future version. We're leaving them right here, right now, where they belong. And then the R part is reinforcing that identity. So that is basically like the brain learns through repetition. So everything that we believe now, everything that we think now, that's because it's been repeated in our minds or being told to us a number of times. And we are able to reprogram the brain. So by repeating, 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 and then reflecting on it, we reinforce the identity of who we want to become and we strengthen and stabilize that version. And that is the fear theory in its most basic form in a nutshell. And it's one of those that then it's just a complete continuous process. It is continuous, it is continuous, it is continuous. And when it comes to like our protection responses, I've got seven. So I always say team expansion has two members, which is well, maybe three, but I always normally say potential and possibility, but we could also maybe add like personal growth in there as well. So like team expansion's got personal growth, potential, and possibility. Over here in my personal team of protection, I have seven different human feelings. Now, there are more than these, but I deal with seven because these are the ones that I've been too well acquainted with over the years, which are comparison, control, overthinking, overwhelm, perfectionism, self pressure, and self doubt. And all of those are actually protection responses. So when I would compare myself to other people, it's keeping me maybe where I am now. When I'm controlling, I'm not as bad as I used to be. I do try and surrender and I try to allow life to unfold. And then I walk the course of it as it's unfolding. Because so many of us, it comes back to safety. We want to control every little thing because then it supports us to feel safe. But then sometimes then if things don't go to plan, it can put us into this big tailspin again. Overthinking, I to me now go with that's where we've got a conflict between maybe our future self and what we want to do and our old self or our current identity that are kind of in conflict and in battle with each other. And it's just going back to if I knew that everything was going to turn out good. If I knew I was going to get the outcome, like what would future me do right now? What would the decision be? And that can eliminate a lot of the overthinking. Overwhelm, I usually think, is a time where we basically need an intentional pause because we're at capacity and we're a little bit full. And it is really important to make sure that we've got an outlet so that we can release those feelings. Like, one of the things that I used to sort of, and sometimes it can happen to me now, like I used to be quite an anxious person. I know, like, obviously, when we've got anxiety, like we feel it in our body. And the first thing, like, if my body was feeling a particular way, I'd go to my head to try and actually sort out the answer. And actually, we cannot think our way out of a physiological feeling. So that's another thing that I encourage people is like when your body is feeling a particular way, experiment and explore with the ways that your body needs to release and let that go. Like for some people, it could be a walk. For some people, it could be some breath work. For some people, it could be going to the gym. It's different for everybody, but it's learning how can I dispel and disperse because it is energy, this energy that's going in my body, rather than straight away going to the mind and going, How do I fix this? So, physiological feeling, solve it with a physiological movement of some sort, or breath work, or whatever works. So many different modalities. Um, Perfectionism, touched on that one already. Like, I used to be really hard on myself if I got things wrong, if I made a mistake at something, whereas now I celebrate the process and the journey. So I'm okay with imperfect. I'm okay with getting things wrong because then I'm able to learn and move from that. And I celebrate the process that I'm going to. I celebrate the steps that I'm taking all of the time instead of beating myself up for a few of the things that maybe didn't quite go so right. So self-compassion, I think I've definitely said it before, but I'm back to that again, like being kind to ourselves, allowing ourselves to be human throughout every like part of the process. Self-pressure, oh, ridiculous, like the amount of pressure that I used to put on myself. And again, I think if you're somebody in life that wants to move through life and grow and do well, sometimes you can expect too much of yourself. So again, it comes back to that self-compassion. I'm a believer that we're always exactly where we're meant to be, always. And that's where, like, if we feel that we need to have an intentional pause because it's okay to have that. You're still where you're meant to be. You're not falling behind. It doesn't matter about being in competition with anyone else. The world is not going to all of a sudden fall apart because you're giving yourself what you need, and then self-doubt. And I think then this is another really normal one. As I said, I've heard a lot of that in my head recently because I did make a really brave step. Like 7 months ago, I took a complete leap out of a career that I'd known for all of my life to start walking a path of the unknown. And whilst there's been certain aspects of that that have been amazing, there are aspects of that that's challenging me and growing me. And when sometimes the opportunities may not come around, and bearing in mind those are opportunities that I created in my head. So we're going back to the expectation thing again. I'd basically got into my human head, and then it's just taking that moment to pause in that self-doubt and just deciding, like, is this true? Do I need to listen to this? What could I believe instead? What's going to facilitate me going forwards? And I have on my office wall a quote that says, "You can have fears and still be fearless." And I think that that's a really important thing to remember. I think that needs to be talked about so much because all of these feelings that I've experienced, I'm not the only one that experiences these. Other ones that people experience can sometimes be like avoidance, procrastination, guilt, people pleasing. They're all just protection responses. But the most important thing is thinking of where am I now? Where or who do I want to be? And knowing that 9 times out of 10, the thing that's going to be in the middle of that is some form of fear. Because when we're changing our identity, when our identity is expanding, when we're growing, when we're learning, when we're evolving, the fear is going to come up to protect the identity that we've always had and the familiar. So that being ready is never going to be a feeling, it's a decision. And it's knowing that fear is going to be with us. Like I always say, it's a bit like being in a car. As long as you're in the driver's seat, fear is going to sit in the passenger seat. It gets to kind of come along. But we don't want fear in the driver's seat because then that's going to dictate the direction that we're going and what we do and the decisions that we make. So we have to pull in on that belief that we've got, the inner knowing, the self-trust, the faith, the possibility, the potential, and all of those positive emotions and feelings as we move from who we are now into who we're possible of becoming.
Amazing understanding that you've acquired a fear. I believe the way that you break it down is really inspiring because we all have goals, we all have aspirations, and it does take a lot of effort, a lot of understanding ourselves, and repetition, as you said, getting used to seeing the results, seeing that person that we are becoming. And sometimes we focus a lot on the external and those emotions, like you said, and they're not as meaningful as we make them seem sometimes, right? We give them that meaning, and we probably should focus more on our goals and how to get there. And I wanted to ask you, how can we find out more about what you do? Is there a website that you can give us? Do you have a book that we could purchase or some sort of platform?
So I love this question. So at the moment, my book, I want to start writing that in the summer. So that's a really good question that you've asked that. I was like, is it too early for a first edition? I was like, hang on a minute, this is the thing I teach. Like, let's just start. So that is something that I plan on starting this summer. In terms of my website, it was meant to go live by the end of this month, and my web designer is currently having her baby. And again, it's one of those where I was like, this is okay. This is like what's meant to be. So, yes, eventually there will be beckyfarrar.com website where you can come and find out. At the moment, probably the best place would be Instagram, Becky Farrar Speaker, and reach out, ask any questions. Like, I am happy to send people a freebie, which is some affirmations, some journaling things, couple of meditations, because as I said earlier on, like I'm an advocate for the slowing down and the stepping back and the intentional pause and strengthening the relationship that we've got with our self. And I really liked what you'd said when you'd said about, always about like the externals. And I think, yes, it's great to have them there, but I think the main focus needs to be on who we are in the process. Because when we're constantly looking for the external, that can kind of wibble and wobble the internals. Whereas if we just are always focusing on what we can do each day and bringing it back to us and acknowledging and recognizing, that's actually really important. Like acknowledging and recognizing the small steps, the consistent steps that support the growth. That is how we grow. Like growth isn't really ever done in like huge, big like leaps. Even me changing my career, that was actually a 3.5 year process of lots of small little steps before I became brave enough ultimately and courageous enough to make that change and let that go. And I think sometimes we can underestimate the small steps, and that's actually where the biggest amount of difference is made. And it's not always sometimes goals, like sometimes it can be implementing a boundary or speaking up a little bit more or saying no when you actually like mean no rather than saying yes when you want to say no. All of these small, tiny things support the person who you are capable of being.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, also how you changed your vision to getting to this point because you felt like you could help out more people and make a bigger difference, even though you were successful in what you were doing and you felt that it was what you wanted to do, is also an example of how you've accomplished your own fears, right? And became who you believed you could become. And I believe it's really good to meet you and just hear about what you're doing right now. And if you do come out with that website, you can always send it to me and I'll add it on so they can find you easily.
Thank you. And this is the thing, like I say, like I am literally a walking and talking embodiment now. And when I finished my career and I kind of felt like I jumped out of a plane and I was like waiting for this parachute and I was like, oh my goodness, like what now? But I genuinely believe that what I'm experiencing now, I'm almost meant to help other people with. and it is very early days. And I'm always really grateful for the conversations that people are willing to have at this stage because sometimes when we have conversations with people who have already done all of the thing, it almost seems too far away. It seems too out of reach for it to be something that maybe we could do. And I'll be honest, there's been some really amazing highs on this. There's been some times like the last few weeks where I know that I'm growing because I can feel it and my body feels it really deeply. But it is coming back to that belief. And I've always had a belief that if you've got something in your heart that you want to be able to do, it's in your heart because it's possible for you to be able to do it. Have I got evidence right now that I can do the things that I think like I want to do or that are in my heart? Absolutely not. Like, no. But I'd like to think that in a few years I can go, I'm so glad that the version of me then in 2025 was courageous enough to take a leap. The version of me in 2026 was strong enough to keep going through the times where she couldn't see. I think one of the important things to remember as well is that there's no guarantees in anything. And back in 2025, like I took a real big leap of faith with nothing other than like a heart and a soul, like a whisper, um, a lot of faith, a lot of self-belief, possible borderline delusional self-belief, but here we go. Um, and then I've just spent this year, I would say, learning so much about myself. So as I continue to do more of this work to support other people with, I deepen the understanding of myself all the time. And I mentioned the self-awareness. And I just think that everything that we do and experience is to support us. It doesn't always feel like it at the time, but it definitely is. And I'm still figuring a lot of things out, and I want to be really honest in that because I think for so many of us, actually, we're all just figuring things out as we go along the way, and we do the best that we can at the time with the information that we've got. And people are still saying to me, like, what's your niche? What's your big aim? And actually, I'm like, I don't want a niche, like, I don't want to have one. But my big aim and my big mission is that more people live a life that feels true to them and that feels good for them and that they fulfill their potential and they just feel content, like they feel content, they feel calm, they get up each day feeling grateful, feeling privileged for the day ahead of them and the choices that they've made and the things that they are doing. And as I say that, I believe that is possible on the other side of fear. So if all I do in this process right now is just share my own story of how I'm still in creating a different relationship with fear, and I think that I always will be because as we continue to grow, those things are just going to come up again and again and again. And it isn't until that we get to the other side and we go, oh, okay, I know what we're doing, but we're growing again. You know, all that self-doubt. Yeah, I'm asking to, I'm being asked to release parts of myself and all of that things. But if this conversation today has supported one person, who knows? Because I knew for so long, who knows that they want to do something different, that they're growing. It is worth what is on the other side of that. And what I've said to someone recently is, whilst my externals for the past few months have been so uncertain, the connection that I've made internally and with myself and the trust that I've gained has been life-changing and has been so valuable and ultimately strengthening the relationship with ourselves is one of the most important relationships that we can strengthen, right?
Yes, and I want to thank you for being transparent about that and also the process that it takes to get there. because we talk about alignment and how many people want to get to this point in life where they feel fulfilled and they're doing what they love and they have control over that. However, it's not a one line situation, right? It's like you said, you have to show up for yourself and kind of work through that fear. And everybody, that's going to look different for everybody, right? Depending on the emotions you feel, whether that's shame or negative self-talk or doubt. So I just want to thank you. I feel like you're a great speaker for this because you admit you experience it yourself. You admit that you had to work through it, and you also have your own way of how to go about it. So I believe people can definitely benefit from what you're doing, and I look forward to hearing a lot more from you.
Thank you. And it is an ongoing process. It always is. I would be, I think anyone that says that it's not, I would call them out and to say like that's not true. Like we all feel it and it is a process and it's a learning and it's an evolution. Then all of a sudden we get to a point where we can look back at a version of ourselves, say like a year before, and be like, who am I now that I wasn't then? And that's when you go, oh, well done, me. And it is, recognizing those. And one thing that actually could be just really nice to finish with is that each and every day, um, as part of my routine, my bedtime routine, when I go to bed and I grab my journal, and every single day I finish the day with one thing that I am grateful for, one thing that I am proud of, and one thing that I am celebrating. Because it's so easy for us to look at the things that we're not doing or look at how fast things are not moving and to gain time each and every day to just acknowledge and recognize how we're growing and how we are evolving and developing really supports that reinforcing the identity that I mentioned in the R and bringing more of those positives and what we're doing to the forefront. So I think that I would invite people to consider doing that to remind themselves each and every day of just how amazing they are.
Thank you so much. I mean, you're reinforcing me today, just showing up and telling me about fear, and I learned a lot also. So thank you so much. It was really nice meeting
Thank you.
you.